So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We're going to have a great conversation today with an expert on parenting counseling, parenting coaching. But before we get to this conversation, I want to say, first of all, thank you guys for tuning in to the show. It means a lot to me. I know what you're doing day by day. You're busy, and the fact that you take a moment to tune in means a lot to me. So thank you. If you like what you hear, and I hope you do, share it with your friends, share it with your family. We are trying to get a listenership to hear all these wonderful people that I bring on the Hamilton Review on a weekly basis, or a bi-weekly basis, actually. So thank you again. And so without any further introductory comments, I'm going to introduce my guest for today. Her name is Heather Spadaccini. She is a parent coach. She has a parenting company, I guess you would call it. Is that correct? Would you call the company, Heather, or what would you call it?
Practice.
A practice. Okay, that's a better word. Called Intrinsic Parenting. She is an educator, actually. She has a master's in education from Columbia, has been a primary school teacher back in New York and here in California as well. And now she has a practice helping people deal with children, children, and helping people be parents, which is, we need, listen, we need all the help we can get. So, Heather Spadaccini, welcome to the Hamilton Review.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton. I'm so glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So before I begin my show, and I think you've heard my podcast, you know how I do it. I usually like to turn the microphone over to my guests and say, tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, where you're from, a little bit about how you ended up becoming a parent coach, because not a lot of people are parent coaches. I can tell you that. There are only a few of you rare people out there who choose this for a profession. So I'm going to stop talking and let you talk. So tell us about your life, and I'll let you introduce yourself in that regard.
Okay, thanks. So, I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. I'm the oldest of four children. I'm also one of the oldest of 18 first cousins. My mom's one of five siblings. So, observing the dynamics of kids and families has just been kind of woven into my existence from the beginning. I was also kind of a nerdy kid who just loved school and loved learning. So becoming a teacher just felt like the right choice for me when I was choosing a career. So as you know, I moved to New York City after college and got my master's degree, and taught fourth and fifth grade at New York City public schools. So there I would have around 30 kids in a class, and
Oh,
it was my job to get to know each of them individually, to understand their learning needs, to understand their emotional needs for each child, and then also to take all of these different individuals and weave them together into a classroom community. And that's experience that I think is still relevant to my coaching today, because a family also needs to honor each individual person and their needs, but also needs to function as a whole.
so
So
how long did you teach school overall? So you taught back in New York, in
Mhm.
Manhattan initially, right? Is that correct? And then another school, you said in Brooklyn, was that correct?
Yes, so I taught, well, that was when I was in graduate school.
Okay.
And then I taught in Manhattan for another couple of years before my kids were born. And I became a full-time parent for several years while my kids were young. And then during that time, we moved from New York to Los Angeles. And then the pandemic happened in that time, and then when everybody was back in school in person and my daughter was in kindergarten, I went back to teaching here in Los Angeles. And when I was teaching here, now post pandemic, I just noticed a shift in the frequency in which parents were reaching out with questions. And it felt like the world had gotten much more complicated. Parents were just dealing with the repercussions of all of the social and learning
Yeah.
effects of the pandemic.
Yep.
And I was hearing the same thing from my friends as well as the families in my class. And it felt like there was a white space in which there's a wider set of parents who were just looking for resources for best practices in parenting. And I just felt really passionate about supporting parents in this way. So I decided to become certified as a parent coach.
Good for you. That's very good. And you know what? Your perception was exactly correct. I think that the pandemic kind of threw everybody on their heels. I think people are coming out of it, frankly, Heather. I think in California, I'm beginning, I mean, certainly people are out and doing things together, which is so wonderful. I was in a restaurant the other day with my wife, and we both looked around. The place was just packed with people. And we looked around and said, this is so nice. This was, a couple of years ago, if we would have everybody in that restaurant would have been arrested, for breaking the rules, and it was such a pleasure to be with people. And I think we're getting back to normal. It'll take maybe a little bit more time, but I think that the kids were really impacted. And of course, when kids are impacted, the parents are impacted too. So, sure, you're the oldest of 18 cousins. That's amazing. That's a
I'm not
big
the
family.
oldest in my cousins. I'm the oldest of my siblings, but I'm like third or fourth oldest of my 18 cousins.
Oh, okay, okay. So and were you a close family?
Yeah.
You saw all 18 of these kids, these people frequently?
Yep. One family lived in Florida, but the rest of us we saw, yeah, fairly frequently.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nothing like big families. Look, I happen to be have a big family, and we don't have quite 18 grandchildren. I'm hoping for 18. We have a ways to go, but we got 13. So we'll see. We haven't, I hope we haven't finished quite yet. So you're a parent coach.
Yes.
You are, I know that you have a couple of, couple strong points. You mentioned to me that you talk about the nervous system regulation
Mhm.
and how you approach just the overall, how you look at kids and how you approach some of their developmental milestones. Tell us a little bit about that concept of just the nervous system development and how you I think your advice would obviously change depending on the age of the child, obviously. So just kind of maybe walk us through that.
So, what I think with regards to nervous system regulation, and really it begins with the parents. So, and what I do is work with the parents to understand. I think a lot of us grow up not understanding sort of like the connection between our thoughts and emotions and how we experience them in our body. And when we're feeling dysregulated, how we respond, and different ways that we may choose to sort of escape those feelings with activities that like numb them, which even something like scrolling on Instagram can be a way of like it actually is a way of sort of like numbing a feeling of overwhelm that you might be having, and really learning to just like understand those feelings when you experience them, to breathe through them, to different kinds of techniques. And when the more that you understand as a parent the way your nervous system works, it can help your children, because it really takes the first 7 years of life for a human's nervous system to take shape. And so, the more regulated that a parent is during that time that they're interacting with their child, then the more regulated that child's nervous system will be. And of course, there's neuroplasticity, we can always change. But ideally, we would have like a more moderated nervous system to begin with. That would be the ideal goal, right?
You mentioned, yes, and it does take a while. I mean, I think human beings, we've talked about this before on the show, human beings are born extremely unformed. It takes, I mean, you think about, out in the wilderness, little baby cubs are tossed out by their mothers after a year or so. In the savannah in Africa, I mean, these little wildebeest stand up and start walking like day number two or day number one. It's amazing how long it takes human beings to kind of get it together. It's always shocking. Um, but I think that you mentioned a word. This is an important word, which is attachment.
Mhm.
Um, you obviously have studied attachment theory. Can you, I have a couple more detailed questions I want to talk about, but can you talk about the word attachment and attachment theory? Because this is a very important issue in my mind.
Yes. So attachment relates to how a child experiences their relationship with a caregiver, right? So you can what we're aiming for is to have a secure attachment, which would be like a feeling of calm when they are with the parent, and then when they are separated from the parent, to know that that parent will then return back to them, that there is a feeling of safety and trust and security between the child and the caregiver.
Right.
And that would be secure attachment, right? Then you can also have um, what's called an anxious attachment, which would be where the child then feels anxiety in the separation between the parent, maybe an insecurity as to what will happen when they are separated from the parent, and then insecurity even when they're with the parent to know, are they going to, when they leave again, how will I react? And they've experienced distress from that. And then there's another type of attachment called avoidant attachment, which means when there is inconsistency in the response that the child receives from the caregiver. If the child feels that their experience is not seen, then they begin to just sort of like shut down. I don't necessarily, it's easier for me to not even express my needs because they're not necessarily being met. And so it's sort of, it's like more of a, like a more of a shutdown kind of nervous system state. And then of course there's disorganized, which is sort of a combination of those two. Um,
Yeah.
you can have different attachments to different relationships in your life. You can be secure with one and have an insecure attachment to another significant person in your life.
I think attachment is very important, and basically, the bottom line is that kids need to have that one-on-one, as much as possible, interaction with an adult figure. John Bowlby did a lot of the work on this, and I think you certainly know that name. What time frame are you talking about? Because I think that there are different people who will make recommendations that children should be with their mother or a nanny or a grandmother for a fairly long period of time. What are your thoughts about timing on that?
I'm not so sure that there's like a particular time that is relevant to the attachment. It's more the quality of the interaction when you are with the child and how they feel with you. And really what is necessary is for a child to have a secure attachment with at least one caregiver. So a secure attachment to one caregiver is going to lead to a healthy outcome for that child, whether that is a parent, a grandparent, a, a foster parent, a nanny, like that. It doesn't necessarily matter the amount of time or who that person is, but it's a consistent and secure attachment to that, to at least one person.
Yeah. Yes, and yes, and I that is, certainly when I think about people ask me, what do you prefer? Well, I prefer actually mothers and children being together, or grandmothers. I mean, grandmothers are awesome if a mother's working, if you can have a grandmother in the picture or another relative, and or a nanny. I like that. I like one-on-one as much as possible in my recommendations to parents. So we talked about a couple of challenges for parents. The big one that stands out for me immediately is our tantrums, because our these little babies come into our life, and they're these are so cute. 3, 4, or 5 month old babies. There's nothing cuter than a 3 or 4 or 5 month old baby, right? But then they change. Then they start having attitudes. They learn the word no eventually, and then around after 1 year of age, around and next year or two, they have these full on unmitigated tantrums that are just, which when they have the first one, they usually shock their parents, because their parents are like, what is going on here? um, can we talk about tantrums and your approach? Because I am sure that this is one of the issues that you deal with when you're counseling the parents, they kind of go, "What do I do?"
Yeah.
And why don't you define how you defined to me yesterday? I won't take your words out of your mouth, but I'll let you define what tantrums are, and tell us a couple little techniques that you recommend.
Okay. So, a tantrum is, first of all, I want to say that tantrums are a typical developmental behavior for children from about 18 months to at least 5 years, and in certain cases, longer. And I say that hopefully so that parents, when they're experiencing a tantrum with their child, that they will not go into a thought spiral that like something is wrong, right? This is a typical behavior. Why is that a typical behavior? Because children at this age have a very limited capacity for self emotional regulation, right? They are primarily co regulating with their caregiver to regulate their emotions. So, a tantrum will frequently result from an outcome that the child doesn't like. There has been a boundary that's set, they can't have something that they want, they have to stop doing something that they want to continue doing, right? And so the boundary being set on that thing is enough to completely flood, going back to nervous system, it can just totally flood their nervous system. And all of the excess energy from that emotion can't be processed through their body. So it's spilling out with crying, yelling, kicking, flailing, sometimes throwing, all the things that we see with tantrums, right? So that's really what a tantrum is. It's like a nervous system overload for the child, which is why I always say to parents, the number one thing that I want you to try to remember with respect to tantrums is to manage your own energy. And I know that that is like much easier said than done, right? You see your child in distress, you become it's natural, of course, for you to feel like upset by that. So if I can try to, reframe this or get it into your head that the more that you can stay calm and centered and grounded, the better it's going to be for your child because of this co-regulation, right? They're overwhelmed by their experience and they're looking to you to say like, how are you handling this? They're borrowing your energy. And so the more calm that you have, the more calm that they can borrow from you in the tantrum process.
So, okay, so they're having a tantrum, they're flailing about. Do you try to, how do you deal with, do you try to stop it? Do you say you're okay, you're gonna be fine, you don't need to cry? I mean, how do you actually, what is the mechanism that you recommend going through in these situations where, and I think we've all can visualize this 2-year-old child, throwing themselves on the ground, beating the ground flat, flailing in every possible way. What do you do?
So I think I want to sort of take off the table this idea that you have the ability that you should be actively trying to stop the tantrum, because the tantrum to a certain extent needs to run its course, right? So you are there to provide a calm and grounded presence and to ensure their safety as the tantrum is running its course. So something I like to say a mnemonic device of like let it be, right? Like let the tantrum go, but also B is BEE. So B is for boundary, E is for empathy, and the second E is for energy, meaning your energy, right? So the first thing is trying too much to explain the boundary. Let's say it's that your child is tantruming because they want candy for breakfast. So if you're explaining, this is why we can't have candy for breakfast, your sugar is going to spike, and then you're going to be in a bad mood, and then your whole day, right? They're not going to be able to understand the rationale of you explaining why the boundary is the boundary. It just is the boundary, right? And the second thing is trying to stop the tantrum through negotiating the boundary. Like, well, what if I just give you a little bite of chocolate? Would you stop? Maybe then you'll stop crying, because then inadvertently the child can then learn that the tantrum itself is like a tool for getting something that they want. So when I say try not to stop the tantrum, using those strategies to actively try and stop the tantrum. And also boundaries relate to safety, right? If the child is hitting you, hitting another sibling, something like that, you may have to, in a gentle and firm way, put your physical presence between them and just say, I will not let you hit me. I will not let you hit your brother, right? So the boundary there does apply to their safety and the safety of everyone else around them.
Do you ever just hold them to you? In other words, sometimes just, sometimes when my children, grandchildren have had tantrums, um, you almost like I have held them to my body and just held them closely. And that does seem to have a calming effect. Is that something that you recommend ever?
Certainly, if the child responds well to that, it's again, it goes back to like each child and potentially their attachment style. Some children respond better to just having personal space and like letting their energy get out of their body.
Uh,
Some children really respond well to that to that embrace, to that containment, like a hug from a parent, to feeling your heartbeat, to feeling your calm presence. That can be really calming to some children. Other children need a little more space. So that's a case where you would just need to know your child individually.
so your child decides to have a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store. What do you do?
So, whenever possible, I would recommend that you leave whatever is like the crowded space that you're in. So, if you can, if you have the ability to abandon the grocery cart in the middle of the store and either go to a quieter place in the store or outside, maybe there's a bench or something where you can sit with them, help them regulate. That would be the ideal situation. Of course, we all know this can't be the case every single time. Sometimes you're in a rush, you have to get something for dinner. So, is there going to be the time where you say, okay, you can have the juice box or whatever it is that they want? Of course, that's going to happen, right? We're humans, life is life, but this is what we're ideally going to do in the best of circumstances.
So they have a tantrum on the airplane, and you're confined, and there are people all around you. How about that one?
Again, I always feel, of course, then parents are going to be looking around and feeling responsible for everyone else's experience on the plane. You feel terrible, other people are wanting a peaceful flight, and that's not happening for them. I understand that. However, again, the more that you can just be calm and be aware, maybe look at the people around you and say, I'm sorry, I'm doing my best, and you're just still doing all the same things that we talked about before to just keep
Right.
yourself calm, hold your child, or like let all of this energy discharge, and I wouldn't necessarily say looking at people and being like, well, kids are kids, right? People might see that as a little glib. But if you're saying the same amount of empathy, going back to, we didn't get back to empathy, right? Just empathy is incredibly softening, right? If you can say to the child, I know you really want candy for breakfast. It's not going to happen. That feels really bad. I understand. The same thing to the people on the plane. I know that this is really not the flight experience that you were wanting. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best, right? So empathy, I think, goes a long way with people. And the last part
Yeah, I
being,
mean, that's almost an impossible answer, your thing to answer. I mean, that may be the time when you pull out the chocolate, candy bar and say, okay, listen.
of
And
course,
I wouldn't fault anyone for doing that, because I mean we've all been on airplane flights, and the kids light up for whatever reason,
of
I mean
course,
they're fickle, these little people, they're very fickle. And so when that happens, I don't fault anyone for going against their normal impulses, which is to keep on denying.
of course.
Okay,
Even
so
sometimes even chocolate doesn't work though on the airplane, right? So sometimes you just do the best you can.
sometimes nothing works. You turn on the entertainment, you do what you can do, but sometimes you just pray that they go to sleep is what you do. Um, so a couple other things. So that's a big one. Tantrums are something that we certainly get a lot of questions about. They're hard. They're hard for parents. Suddenly these beautiful cherubic children become little demons, and it becomes very, very difficult to deal with them, and it's hard. The good news is that Kids grow out of them eventually. They really do. And that's something that we as practitioners say. I don't know if parents always believe us in the middle of the fight, but it is true.
Yep.
Another issue I want to you're a parent counselor. I have parents in my practice who are at loggerheads about certain things. The classic one right now is vaccines. There are some people, a father, a mother who wants, who wants to get their child vaccinated. The father says, "No, I don't." And there's this major conflict that happens between this schools, also enter into that equation as well. Um, Tell us how you begin to sit down and you have like that situation. How do you begin to mitigate parents who are at different ends of the spectrum on a particular issue?
So I think when co parents disagree, it can often seem to one co parent that the other has made a decision arbitrarily. When in truth, most of our parenting decisions are made based on a previous experience that we've had in our life and whether that experience led to a positive outcome or a negative outcome. So, the first thing I will do with my clients is to guide them to reflect on their own life experiences surrounding whatever is the particular decision that they're making. And when the other partner can hear the history that their co parent has around that issue, it can begin to bring some understanding, right? Like that they're not just coming at it out of thin air, they have a lived experience that is informing this decision. Like an example that I often use is something just that everyone maybe has experienced, like picky eating, right? So if you have a, a family with a picky eater and the debate is over whether or not like the child should be allowed to have dessert what if they haven't had a good dinner, right? One parent had a sibling that was a picky eater, and it resulted in their sibling being frequently sick and missing a lot of school, and maybe they required medical intervention. So that parent might be feeling really stressed about this issue around eating. They might feel like dessert needs to be used as a motivator to get them to eat like a basic amount of nutritious food. And then sitting across the table is their partner who also had a sibling that was a picky eater, but that sibling grew up perfectly healthy. They now love every food in the world, and their attitude is like, everything works out. Just let her have dessert. It's going to be fine. Right. But when they hear each other's stories, then maybe there can be a little bit of understanding around why that decision is come to. And I think the most important thing is that the co parents need to come to a decision in private about how they want to handle they need to come to a compromise or some sort of decision in private away from the children about how the decision will be handled at least for a period of time, right? So we're going to try it this way for this period of time, because when the parents are in disagreement and the children know they can go to one parent and get response A and go to a different parent and get response B, that is confusing to the children, and it also then can cause resentment between the parents, particularly for the parent who's the more boundary setting parent.
Yeah. Well, you see this. I mean, and I think that we come to the parenting world from usually very different backgrounds. I mean, everybody's everybody has very different family dynamics, and I think that you're absolutely correct that we do, for better or for worse, we kind of incorporate what we knew as children, what we knew in our family, how our parents dealt with certain situations, and we begin. And I said this in our pre. Um, Conversation yesterday about how we kind of tend to we end up saying the same things that our parents said to us when we were children, and I sometimes catch myself saying that was exactly what my dad would say or my mother. And not that I don't love and honor my parents' memory, but I don't necessarily want it to be exactly like them in my parenting, if you know what I mean. I think
Yep.
most people feel that way. Um, I don't know. Do you feel that way, Heather? Do you want to be exactly like your parents? And maybe I shouldn't extrapolate into generalities.
I mean, I think every human wants to individuate from their parents to a certain degree, right? That's all of
Okay,
it.
that's That's how people with master's degree would say it. Yes, they want to individuate. Is that the word you said? Okay, I didn't know that word. Anyway, so I do think that, when these, conflicts come, obviously I think the most important thing we can do is keep talking to each other as much as we possibly can. If you cut off communication, then you end up in deep water. And I see that sometimes in families that are divorced. They don't, they literally do not talk to each other about issues. Their mediator is a lawyer, which is very expensive, by the way, and also I think very unproductive. But that's for free. Um, but I think the important thing is communication. Okay, Heather, on the other issue that I wanted to talk to you about, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, are teenagers.
Yep.
Teenagers are a source of great consternation for parents because they start to become different, their own unique individual person. I think we all remember being teenagers ourselves and how we dealt with our parents and how we treated them and how we, you know, navigated our teenage years. Can you just kind of lay kind of a background on these teenage years from a developmental perspective, and also talk to us a little bit about how, how do we how do we handle teens that are becoming more and more isolated from us and more and less receptive to our discipline, I guess, and also our recommendations.
Hmm. Yeah, as a parent of a teenager myself, I really understand this question. So I think, as you were saying, is the first thing is to keep in mind that this is their developmental role, going back to the word individuate, to differentiate themselves as individual beings separate from us as as their parents. They are going to say things to you like, you don't get me, you don't understand me. They will want to spend more time with their friends than they do with you. They'll want to spend more time in their room, and all of that is expected and normal, right? But also, that doesn't mean that you should just completely say, well, that's, that's what they want. They just want to be on their own. They still do want your attention, your guidance, your boundaries. They're just expressing it in a different way. So I think it's really important to remember to still involve, and I think you can involve your teenager, right? Like, the two things I want to always keep in mind with teenagers is supporting their growing independence and their growing autonomy. So independence being the ability to do things on their own, and autonomy being the ability to make sound decisions about the things that they're going to do. So, for example, like independence, I think with the way that our kids are scheduled so much with their school and their activities, we can forget that they also need to learn things like how to do their own laundry and the dishes, or to, if it's safe, if you live in a community where it's safe for them to walk to the store to get a few things that you might need for dinner, or maybe you drive them to the store and you have to take a phone call, but they're going in, we need these three things, here's the credit card. An example I think I gave you yesterday was like, the last time that I flew with my son, we got to the airport and I handed him the ticket at the entrance and I said, okay, here's the ticket, you need to get us to the gate, we need to go through security, we need to get through the airport, I'm right here with you, but you're leading the way, right? So
Mhm.
that would be with a mind towards independence, right? You're still there to support them, but you're letting them take the lead. And the same thing goes with autonomy, right? This is a little more specific to teaching them the decision making process. How do they, when they go out in the world and they're presented with a situation, how do they make a good decision about whether or not they want to do that thing? Let's say your teenager says they want to go to a concert. Instead of like, you, of course, as the parent, are going to come up with a bunch of questions that you have about this concert. But maybe you sort of hold back and you put that back to your teenager. You want to go to this concert? Okay, I'm the parent. I'm going to make the final decision, but let's work together on like how we would make a decision as to whether or not this is a good idea. What information do you think we need to make this decision? So maybe hopefully they're going to say, where is this concert? What time is it? Who are you going with? How are you getting there? How are you getting home? And if the answer is it's at the Hollywood Bowl, I'm going with my two best friends who I know and trust, and you know and trust. We're taking the bus. We're going to be home by 11. Like the answer is probably going to be, sounds great. Like, and if the answers are, it is a new music exhibit at a vacant warehouse downtown, and my friend's older brother, who I've never met and you've never met, says he's going to give us a ride. Um, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
have a discussion about why those answers lead the answer to be no, this is not a good idea, right? And you're involving them in the process. And that is, as their prefrontal cortexes are slowly developing, you're teaching them like how to make decisions in the world.
Yeah, that's a great approach. It really is. And the course the question becomes when your child is making bad decisions, they're dabbling in pot, they're beginning to not, take their lessons, their studies seriously. What do you do when you have a kid who's a little bit who pushes back in a deleterious way to them personally? How do you deal with that?
I mean, I think then you need to try to find loving ways to set the boundaries, right? So maybe you are encouraging them to spend more time at home. Like you might say, let's say that it's like Friday nights is the night that they leave school and like go out with their friends, and you're saying something like, okay, well, Friday nights is you can have anybody that you want over to our house. We'll order pizza for you. Whoever, you can have a dozen friends over if you want, but you have to be at home. Like you're inviting them back in as to the family, and like giving them some space within the safety of your home, so that they might not feel maybe that need as much to go out. Like you're giving them a little bit of space and independence, but still in a safer environment. That might be one suggestion that I would have.
Okay, I mean, a lot of kids, um, they make bad judgments on kids that they hang out with. This is something that you hate to impugn the uh the morality of another kid, if they're doing things that are really not good, they're hanging out with a kid who has done something that you don't approve of.
Mhm.
They're cheaters. They've cheated on tests, or they've done things. They've gone out and stolen something, or shoplifted.
Yeah.
um how do you deal with those situations where the kids, you look at your kid and you go, I don't want my kid hanging out with these people? Um,
Yeah.
you put like, I mean, there's a point where you have to kind of like, in my mind, you have to kind of say, this is not going to happen. So where do you draw there are times when I think that, and this is always tricky when you have older kids who have more free will and more autonomy. Um, how do you draw some very clear red lines that your kids cannot cross?
Yeah, I mean, when and where you draw that line is going to depend on the situation and the child. Like one thing that I would do to the first part of your question is, sometimes if you're imposing too much of your own will on them, it only makes them want to be with that person even more, right? So
Yep.
if you can put it back to the child, back to your teenager, and the question to them being like, what is it that you like about spending time with this group of kids? How do you feel when you're with them? What do you feel? What are the emotions or the sensations that you feel? Like, what is the part of you that gets to be expressed when you're with them? So if you're giving them a little space, because teenagers are, as we said, in this individuation process, they're trying on different personalities. Am I this kid? Am I this kid who breaks the rules a little bit? And they might feel when you ask them, and the hope would be that when you give them the space to answer it for themselves, that they'll be like, yeah, it's actually I get a little bit nervous when I'm with them, but I think they're cool, right? Like they're the cool kids at school, but it makes me feel, a little nervous when I'm with them. Okay, well then there's a window that's opened to like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? To like, it's opening the window to a discussion. Because what you eventually, yeah, you will have to say like, I'm sorry, you just can't, if they're if they're getting into trouble with the law or something like that, you will have to like draw that hard line, but you want to try other ways to get your child to come to that
Yeah.
realization before you're the one who has to draw that hard line.
I think that the hard line is going to have to be ultimately there, but you hopefully want to approach the hard line very gently and very softly.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, there's no question that there are times when you really have to intervene. Kids are certainly who are getting into like drugs, for example, bad things like that, which are, in today's world, I mean, getting into drugs is bad news because there are other things which are lacing these drugs like fentanyl and things like that, and we all know what happens with that. Well, listen, Heather, I want to be responsible with our time, with your time, and also the time of our listeners. You have been really, really helpful, and I like I like your approach to kids. Um, Again, Heather's name is Spadaccini. I'll spell it for you. Spadaccini. Spadaccini. Her practice is called intrinsic parenting. Heather, how do people find you?
You can find me at intrinsic-parenting.com or at intrinsic parenting on Instagram.
Beautiful. Okay, intrinsic-parenting.com.
Yes,
And I know that you not only I think you mainly talk to people via Zoom, is that correct?
I do, primarily.
And so you can access Heather via, well, I mean, certainly you got her email address there. You can access her and have a conversation like I'm having a conversation with her right now via Zoom, and that is very nice. I know that you also make in-person visits from time to time. Is that correct too?
In Los Angeles.
Okay, not in New York, not around. Okay, they'll have to pay you to fly back and forth if they do that.
I
You'd be worth it though.
would
So
love.
anyway, well, listen, I wish you the very best on your practice, intrinsic parenting. And Heather, thank you for taking the time to be on the Hamilton Review today.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hamilton.
I hope everyone has gained some insight about how to deal with tantrums and parental discord and teenagers. And there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of stages. We could have talked for hours, Heather.
Yes.
But thank you again. And friends, thank you all for tuning in today to the Hamilton Review. Appreciate you. And until next time, be well. Bye bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.